Hi everybody, thought I'd just send another video out for you to have a look at. If you've got nothing better to do, you can always just click on it and see what sort of nonsense I'm coming out with this afternoon. But it's Wednesday afternoon. What's the date? The 22nd of April. All of us still in lockdown. Don't know when the doors are going to be flung open for us to get out again. But here we are. And I sent a letter around to those who could receive it a few days ago about what is church. And it reminded me actually of something that happened a few years ago. I was doing a baptism preparation evening with a number of parents in my last church. And we were talking about what the church is. And I remember saying to all the group there, all the parents who'd gathered, I said, well, if this building that we're in tonight, because we used to always meet in the church, if this building fell down tonight, burned down and the roof caved in and collapsed, then the church would still exist. You know? The church would still exist. And then there's one bright sparks, and he said, yeah, unless all the congregation were in the building at the time. Yeah, but the point was made. What is church? And the church is the people of God. That's me and you. We are the church of God. But often when we think about the church, we think about the building, don't we? You know, I'm getting married in the morning, get me to the church on time. We think of the building. We think of the building all the time. It's the Church of St Andrews, or the Church of All Saints, or whatever it might be, or Holy Trinity Church. We think of the buildings. It's hard for us not to think about the bricks and the mortar of the places where we worship as the church. But actually the church are the people of God. It's us. And the building behind me is the building where the Church of God meets. But as I said in that letter I sent out, which I just wanted to sort of flag up again on this video, you know, Jesus didn't set up a church. You know, I'm convinced Jesus didn't set up a church at all. Jesus didn't even set up a religion, Christianity. You know, some would argue that was St. Paul who established Christianity as a religion. But Jesus didn't set up a religion. He didn't set up political power structures that we seem to have in our churches today. He certainly didn't set up, you know, worship which involved fancy robes and vestments and all of that stuff. Jesus, what he did do was established a way of living. And that's what he invites us and calls us to live as the church, the people of God, to live a life which is following Jesus of Nazareth. And what a life he lived. I mean, a life which was so radical it cost him his life in the end, because people couldn't cope with him. But yet his message is one that we are called as the Church of God to live to. And on the letter I invite you all to ponder, to reflect, and to think a little bit, if you can, over these weeks about what it is the church we are called to be now in this time, and in this sort of position we are in. What is God asking us to be in this current time? What is it that we would do well to take forward when we eventually come out of this situation and we do meet again in our building and we enjoy worshipping together again? What is it that we have learned as the Church of God that we want to take forward into next year and the years beyond? And what are the essential, the very things at the heart for each one of us, which church should be for us and should be? The little video that I sent out as well, that I know that you've been able to sort of log on to, it sort of mentions 4 things on there, and I think those 4 things beginning with L are really good. The first thing is that church should be about love, and when we follow Jesus, we look at Jesus who was inclusive totally. And he was inclusive of all people, whether they were black, whether they were white, whether they were young, whether they were old, whether they were male, whether they were female, whether they were straight, whether they were gay. Don't think it matters at all, because love doesn't build barriers. Love builds bridges amongst people, as Jesus did, and so we're called to do. So that's the first L. The second L, of course, is liberation. In Luke chapter 4, we hear Jesus' mission for the church, and it was to open the eyes of the blind and to set free those in prison and so on, and to declare the Lord's favour. And that's what liberation is. And we're called to be a church which liberates, which lives that message as well, and brings freedom, brings wholeness to all people. The third thing is to launch. And it's been brilliant to see so many people like Team Shottery and the Pastoral Symphony Group and many others who are just taking their own calling from God and exercising their ministry. You don't have to have a piece of plastic around your neck or a blue scarf around your neck to be in ministry. Jesus calls you and me to minister and to be launched, as it were, into our ministry and to be free, to exercise it. And then the fourth L is to lead. And again, we're all called to lead by the way we live. To give a lead in the world and society at the moment, that we live differently, that our values are different, and that we follow something far greater than what others would have us follow and be drawn into. And that's Jesus himself. So things to reflect on as we go forward. What it is to be church and what God is calling us to be. And when we get back into the building, we'll do some thinking together about what we've learned through this time, and we'll think about then what God would have us be as we move forward. Just a couple of things that next week, and I'll send some emails out about this, but next week, perhaps next Wednesday, a week today, would like to invite you to a Zoom social. Sue and I, here at the vicarage, where we'll invite you to a glass of wine, bring a glass of wine along with you, or a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or something, and we'll just have a chat. How's it all going? How are we getting on? And just to be together, virtually, as it were. And then we'll end with a very simple act of worship, maybe compline together as we round up the evening. And the other thing as well that Sue and I have been talking about quite a lot, certainly at the end of last year, and it just seems right now to mention it, we would like to start a book club, a Christian book club. Obviously we wanted to do that physically here at the vicarage or wherever, like another home group, but this would be a book club where we can look at a book together, read a book over the course of a month, and then come back together and have a natter about it and to aid us in our discipleship as another way of growing together. Again, I'll send out an email about that, so look out for that, and if you're interested in being involved in that book club with Sue and I, then respond to me and we'll get our first meeting together and we'll have a chat about how it all goes. But it's been good to do this again today, to speak to you on video, as it were. But keep being the church God invites you to do. Keep reflecting on what he would have you do, and me in the future. And may God bless you, and I will see you and hear from you again soon.